right, greetings class. We're going to discuss the story that you should have read for by now for today, A Lesson in Discipline. And if you have not read it, make sure you do that before you watch this video. So our author, Teresa Foley, is a classroom teacher, director of curriculum for the public schools of Dover, New Hampshire. Could not find a lot. That was as of when this textbook was published. I couldn't find a whole lot of information on Teresa Foley, so I guess not an accomplished author like many of the other ones that we study and stories that we read. However, basically what we're going to read is an article. It is a short story that was published in Harper's Weekly, which was a weekly magazine in 1956. All right. However, a lot of the lessons and a lot of the things that we're going to learn from the story a lot of these things could very well have take place today in 2020. Let's get into our story. Okay, so you read this for today. There's 30 kids, right? And were they a good class, well behaved, well mannered, ready to learn? Not quite. They were the bad class, and I guess that was kind of the reputation maybe that other teachers gave them. The story is written in the first person point of view. You see words like we in there, so that means that the person who's telling the story is actually in the class. Okay, we don't know if this is a true story or not. It maybe not. It doesn't really matter. Let's talk about the word discipline, first of all. I guess what are some things, what's the first thing you think of when you think of the word discipline? You think of rules, punishment, you're getting disciplined, maybe some harshness. The word discipline, maybe doesn't give you warm, fuzzy feelings, positive feelings, maybe more negative than anything. But is it important to be disciplined? I think we would all agree, yes, it is. As a teacher, I can't, if there's not a level of discipline that you are showing, I can't teach. You can't learn. And that's part of the contract that Miss Baracombi has with the kids. I teach, you learn. So let's see, moving on. I'm going to ask you to have your book open. You should have now open to page 353. The first column there on page 353, her opening speech, very no nonsense, right? Very much to the point. My name is Virginia Baracombi, and it will be Miss Baracombi to you indefinitely. One of these days, you will meet someone from the last school in which I taught. The worst that he tells you about me will be true. So she's kind of setting the stage, setting the tone. I don't mess around. I'm to the point, no nonsense. Column 2 on page 353. There's a group of kids called the Idiots and the Hard Nut Rebels, and that those are not the names that the teacher gives them, but rather the class kind of gives them those names and categorizes them. And so what character traits of Miss Baracombi does the example of the idiots demonstrate in column 2? She basically showed them that she doesn't accept foolish, rude, or disruptive behavior whatsoever. She doesn't put up with it. And for the most part in the story, the kids respond to that. Probably the biggest eye-opener for the class, you probably agree, is the worst kid in the whole class, Lenny Sopel. He makes a wisecrack, and she makes him stand at his desk the entire afternoon, then seemingly has to stay after school for, let's see, how long was that again? I don't know, a couple months. And they were like, whoa, just for one little wisecrack, all that happens? But really what was happening? She wasn't punishing him or giving him detention, but rather he didn't know how to read. And how do we find this out? Alice happens to overhear what was happening, and she tells the class, and then they're like, well, wait a minute, no, Lenny's in 7th grade. He knows how to read. Have you ever heard him read in class? Yeah, I guess I haven't either. And so that's really what's happening, right? Mrs. Barracombe is trying to help him to read, but yet he's also allowing him to save some pride by not having everyone else know what she's doing. And so, but she's helping him out. She cares about him. I'm on page 355 now. What can you infer about the parents' relationship with their children from column 1? You get the impression that that the parents are behind the teacher here, right? Which is a very important thing, and that's gonna help the teacher, and then also it's gonna help the teacher teach the kids a whole lot better. But you also get the impression that the parents maybe don't have a whole lot of control over their kids, or maybe they don't expect a whole lot from them. Column 1 kind of talks about that. And column 2 on page 355, there's some hyperbole there. Barbarians, okay? They're not quite barbarians, are just barbaric, warmongering, troublemaking people, right? And near simians are like cavemen. And so there's a little bit of exaggeration, hyperbole being used in column 2. And then we had never been convinced that the discipline comes from within. And keep that in mind. So that line happens when after the teacher, Miss Barracombe, gets a letter, and we hear from the other teacher that she had lost somebody dear. Now, we don't know who it was, and that's part of the story. It doesn't really matter. But we do know that she's lost somebody, and then the kids kind of learn from her reaction to that this kind of thing can, she was this rock that they were looking at, and that just unflappable, and now all of a sudden she's just her demeanor and her attitude just completely changes as she walks out of the room, and this was an eye-opener for them. And did anyone threaten them to behave the rest of the day? No, nobody had to. They achieved something called self-discipline. They were self-disciplined, and they probably were quiet and most well-behaved when nobody was watching. Then and it was all because mostly because Miss Barracombe had taught them that's important to be self-disciplined, and so they basically applied that lesson that she had taught them the rest of the day, and maybe learned something about themselves as well. Okay, wow, that was page 356. Then just noticed her when she gets the letter, she just kind of becomes a different person almost. And how do you, I guess a question I have is, how do you think the students' reaction to Miss Barracombe's tragedy might affect their behavior in the future? Well, I think we saw a little bit of that for the rest of the afternoon, but maybe witnessing that reaction that she had to her tragedy, it seems to almost have made them more mature. And then part of maturity is being self-disciplined. So you as a student too, part of your maturity is that you have work to do, you have an assignment, and you do it, and nobody has to hound you or get on your case about it, but you just kind of do that because that's maturity, that's self-discipline, it's part of that. And as you get older, more is going to be expected of you. And so that sort of maturity is something that is a very valuable asset for you later on in life as you have a job and hope to hold a job and keep a job and work with others as well. And if somebody assigns you a task, basically you're preparing for life. School, part of this school, your school experience prepares you for later on in life, because there's going to be things that are expected of you, just like we teachers and your parents expect you to do your work. That same thing is going to be the case. And so Ms. Barracombe had been trying to teach them that. All right, let's go through the questions on page 353, or 357 rather. Why was the class terrible? It was a bunch of rowdy kids, the narrator says they grew stupider and lazier and fresher and more obnoxious every year. So it's just one of those bad behaved classes. Then the contract between Miss Barracombe and the class is basically, I teach, you learn. You do your job, I'll do mine. That's the contract. And they kind of respected that. That's straightforward approach. It also says other teachers are maybe more lenient. So Miss Barracombe, it sounds like, was the right teacher for this class. Number 3, what causes her to lose control? And that was that letter that she received in that day and age. It was called a telegram that was given to get a message to somebody quickly. This is told in first person point of view. The last thing she teaches the class is that even the strong can be shaken. Everyone is human and vulnerable to sorrow or tragedy, even though, maybe they were starting to wonder that because she was so consistent in everything that she did and so steady. And then this just rocked her, and that was an eye-opener for the class. So Miss Barracombe, how would you have reacted if Miss Barracombe had been your teacher? That's something for you to, I think maybe you would appreciate, and maybe hopefully you appreciate what we try to teach you and to build the study skills and things like that. We're not, we do that because we care about you. We want you to be successful as a student in high school and beyond as well. And so I think a lot of maybe you thought of like Miss Barracombe, maybe some of the things that, I do or whatever, or my classroom management maybe was something similar, some similarities there. Let's see. The subject of the story. Let's talk about theme. Theme of the story basically is all adults face tragedies that can cause them to lose control from time to time. All right, so you will be doing let's talk about theme for a second here. All right, so the underlying meaning of a literary work is theme. It can be directly stated, but more often it is implied, and I just kind of told you what the theme of the story was before. So basically the purpose that the author sits down and writes it is what they're trying to get across. That's the theme. All right, so a couple things to know for the worksheet. The narrator explains that the class has Miss Barracombe, who is not an amateur, an experienced career teacher that they have. And Miss Barracombe characterization of Miss Barracombe is that she required students to work and learn, right? She didn't let them get off the hook with wisecracks or, control the classroom at all, but I teach, you learn mentality. The narrator's retelling of events encourages us, the reader, to feel the students' pride in their accomplishment. They're kind of proud of themselves for being self-disciplined for once. They didn't know they could do it, maybe, because no one had really expected them to. You and I are bound together in a contract for 1 year. She means that I teach and you learn. So the student know that the student's parents are behind Miss Barracombe. They support her. And Miss Barracombe handles the idiots and the hard nuts by being firm and always expecting the best from them and not letting them get away with anything. Lenny Sopel, his pride is saved when Miss Barracombe tries to teach him how to read secretly. And the students, we're told, sit quietly the rest of the afternoon after Miss Barracombe gets a telegram, and they see her strength shaken, and once they see that, they were not aware of how much they relied on her for strength. So in lesson and discipline, what do the students learn? That true discipline comes from within, self-discipline. And that comes with maturity. So figurative language, know that this is an important part of this story, okay? Characterization of Miss Barracombe, she's a strong personality, not weak. Miss Barracombe loses control as well. Did you like Miss Barracombe? Yeah, I think the characterization of her, it makes her likable. The students depend on her for strength. The students also learn that nobody can be in control at all times, and I'm running out of time here. Miss Barracombe is not an amateur. She is an experienced teacher. And the students know that it was a bad class, and they have to honor their contract, and the telegram that she received was not good news. And that's all you need to know for your worksheet. Make sure you hand it in next Monday.